The first pale light of dawn creeps through the shutters of the blacksmith's cottage, casting long, gentle shadows across the earthen floor. The air is cool and still, carrying the faint scent of yesterday's forge work, that metallic tang that never quite leaves the workshop next door. Thomas awakens slowly, as he has every morning for the past 23 years. His calloused hands reach for the rough woolen blanket, pulling it closer for just a moment longer. The rooster's crow echoes distantly from the village square, but there is no rush here. The rhythm of a blacksmith's day is measured and deliberate, like the steady beat of hammer on anvil. He rises carefully, his joints protesting slightly from yesterday's work. The wooden floor feels cool beneath his bare feet as he pads quietly across the room, mindful not to wake his wife Martha, who still sleeps peacefully in their shared bed. The morning ritual begins as it always do, as slowly, methodically, with the practiced movements of a man who has performed these same actions thousands of times before. The wash basin sits on a small wooden table near the window. Thomas pours water from the clay pitcher, the liquid making a gentle splashing sound as it meets the bottom of the basin. The water is cold, drawn from the well the evening before, and it shocks his system awake as he splashes it on his face. He takes his time, letting the droplets fall back into the basin with tiny, satisfying plops. He dresses in his work clothes, a simple linen shirt, already stained with small burn marks from flying sparks, and thick woolen breeches that have been mended several times over the years. Each garment tells a story of countless days spent at the forge, of metal shaped and reshaped, of a life lived in service to the village's needs. The cottage is quiet except for the gentle breathing of his sleeping family. Thomas moves through the main room, past the cold hearth where last night's embers have long since died to ash. He'll return to kindle it later, but for now, his attention turns to the workshop that adjoins their humble home. The heavy wooden door creaks softly as he opens it, revealing the familiar sanctuary of his trade. The forge sits cold and silent in the center of the room, its stone and clay construction darkened by years of use. Around it, the tools of his craft hang from wooden pegs and rest on sturdy table shammers of various sizes, tongs with different grips, files worn smooth from constant use. Thomas begins his morning preparation with the care of a priest tending to an altar. First, he must assess the state of his forge. He runs his hands along the stone edges, checking for cracks that might have appeared overnight. The bellows hang silent beside the hearth, their leather worn soft from countless hours of pumping air to feed the hungry flames. The fuel for today's work sits in neat piles around the workshop. Charcoal, carefully selected and prepared, fills several baskets. Each piece has been chosen for its burning properties, hardwood charcoal that will burn hot and long, giving the steady heat needed to work iron into submission. Thomas sifts through the charcoal with his fingers, feeling for pieces that are too small or too large, sorting them into different containers with the methodical patience that defines his approach to everything. Building the fire is an art form in itself. Thomas begins by placing the smaller pieces of charcoal in the center of the forge, creating a nest of fuel that will catch and hold the initial flame. He adds tender-tree grass and small twigs collected over the past weeks, nestling them carefully between the charcoal pieces. The arrangement must be just right, with enough space for air to circulate but not so much that the heat will dissipate too quickly. The flint and steel come next, their familiar weight comfortable in his weathered hands. The striking motion is practiced and sure steel against flint, creating sparks that arc gracefully through the still air of the workshop. One spark catches in the tinder, glowing like a tiny star before beginning to spread. Thomas blows gently on the growing ember, his breath coaxing it into a proper flame. As the fire takes hold, he begins the rhythmic pumping of the bellows. The leather expands and contracts with each push, sending streams of air into the forge. The flames respond eagerly, growing brighter and hotter with each breath of oxygen. The workshop begins to fill with the warm, dancing light of the fire, shadows flickering across the stone walls. While the forge warms, Thomas prepares his workspace. He selects the tools he'll need for today's plan to work a horseshoe that needs reshaping, several nails for the carpenter's project, and a knife blade that a farmer brought in for repair. Each task requires different tools, different techniques, different levels of heat and timing. The anvil stands ready, its surface polished smooth by years of use. Thomas runs his hand across its face, feeling for any imperfections that might affect his work. The anvil is the heart of his craft, the immovable foundation against which all metal must yield. Its weight nearly 200 pounds of solid iron anchors not just his work but his entire world. The morning light grows stronger now, streaming through the small windows of the workshop and mixing with the warm glow of the forge. Thomas can hear the village beginning to stir distant voices. The creak of cartwheels on cobblestones, the lowing of cattle being led to pasture. But these sounds feel far away, separated from the focused quiet of his workspace. He begins with the horseshoe, selecting a piece of iron bar stock that has been waiting for this moment. The metal is cold and dark, showing no hint of the malleable material it will become under heat and pressure. Thomas places it carefully in the growing fire, positioning it where the flames burn hottest and most evenly. The waiting begins. This is perhaps the most crucial skill of the blacksmith, knowing when the metal has reached the perfect temperature for working. Too cold, and it will resist shaping, potentially breaking under the hammer's force. Too hot, and it will burn, becoming brittle and useless. Thomas watches the metal intently, looking for the subtle changes in color that indicate its readiness. The iron begins to glow, first a dull red that barely shows against the brightness of the flame, then gradually deepening to a cherry red, and finally to the bright orange yellow that tells him the moment has arrived. Using his tongs, he grasps the heated metal and brings it to the anvil in one smooth, practiced motion. The first hammer blow rings out across the workshop, a clear musical note that will become the soundtrack of the day. Thomas works with steady, measured strokes, each blow carefully placed and precisely controlled. The hammer becomes an extension of his arm, its weight and balance as familiar as his own heartbeat. The metal responds to his touch, gradually taking the curved shape needed for a horseshoe. With each strike, sparks fly in brief, bright arcs, creating momentary stars in the dim workshop. The iron holds its heat for only a short time, and Thomas must work quickly and efficiently. reshaping the metal while it remains pliable. When the orange glow begins to fade, he returns the piece to the fire, pumping the bellows to restore the heat. This rhythm heating, hammering, reheating will continue throughout the morning, each cycle bringing the horseshoe closer to its final form. Between the intense moments of shaping, there are periods of quiet preparation. Thomas files the edges smooth, checking the fit and balance of the shoe. He tests its strength, bending it slightly to ensure it will hold up to the stresses of daily use. These quieter moments allow him to plan his next moves, to visualize the final product and the steps needed to achieve it. The workshop grows warmer as the morning progresses. Sweat begins to bead on Thomas's forehead, and he pauses occasionally to wipe it away with a cloth that hangs from his belt. The physical demands of the work are considerable: the constant lifting of heavy hammers, the manipulation of hot metal, the pumping of bellows butt. These movements have become second nature over the years. As he works, Thomas reflects on the generations of blacksmiths who came before him. His father taught him at this very forge, and his grandfather before that. The techniques he uses, the way he holds his tools, the rhythm of his work, all of these have been passed down through centuries of craftsmen, each adding their own refinements to the ancient art. The village begins to come alive around him. He can hear children playing in the streets, their laughter mixing with the calls of merchants setting up their stalls in the market square. Women carry water from the well, their voices creating a gentle murmur of conversation as they share news and gossip. The familiar sounds of daily life create a comfortable backdrop to his work. Occasionally, a villager stops by the workshop. Perhaps the miller needs a tool repaired, or the innkeeper requires new hinges for a door. Thomas greets each visitor with the same patient courtesy, listening carefully to their needs and explaining what work will be required. These interactions form the web of relationships that bind the village together, with the blacksmith serving as one of its most essential threads. The morning's work continues with the methodical pace that defines the craft. Each piece of metal must be heated, shaped, cooled, and finished with the same attention to detail. There are no shortcuts in blacksmithing, no ways to hurry the process without compromising the quality of the final product. This enforced patience becomes a form of meditation, a way of being fully present in each moment of the work. As the sun climbs higher, the workshop fills with the accumulated heat of the forge. Thomas moves more slowly now, conserving his energy for the long day ahead. He drinks water from a clay jug, the liquid warm from sitting near the fire, but still refreshing. The rhythm of work continues: heat, hammer, shape, cool each cycle, bringing him closer to completing the day's tasks. The horseshoe nears completion. Its curves now smooth and even, its nail holes precisely placed. Thomas holds it up to the light, checking for any imperfections that might affect its performance. Satisfied with his work, he sets it aside to cool completely. The metal gradually darkening as it releases its heat to the surrounding air. The morning has passed in this timeless rhythm of creation, of transforming raw material into useful objects through the application of heat, force, and skill. As Thomas prepares to begin work on the next item, he feels the deep satisfaction that comes from practicing an ancient craft, from being part of an unbroken chain of knowledge and tradition that stretches back to the very beginnings of human civilization. The forge continues to burn steadily, its warm light and gentle heat creating a cocoon of purpose and productivity in the heart of the village. And Thomas continues his work, hammer in hand, ready to shape whatever metal the day may bring to his anvil.